Welcome. I'm Stephanie Jenkins. We're here to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Mockingbird Foundation with some fantastic keyboardists. We're here with Rob Barraco and Jonny Grusauskas. Rob, Jonny, welcome. Thank you so much for coming here today to talk about music education and improvisation.
Good to be a part of it.
Very happy to be here.
So let's just go ahead and get things started by diving into your music education experiences. Do you have any memorable experiences that stand out from your music education? Maybe an early lesson that's vivid in your memory?
I have one. So I went to college as a classical organ major, and I really hated it. I after just a few weeks, I was asking myself, like, what am I going to be doing with this? Playing classical organ, playing the church, what? And I decided to switch to piano. And right after I made the switch, the great bassist Ron Carter, who was part of the Miles Davis Quintet from the 60s and the early 70s, did a jazz workshop at my school. And I attended, and these guys were, it was a quartet, and they were just cooking, playing all kinds of really cool stuff. But they didn't have a piano player. And at one point, the drummer stood up and asked if there was anybody out there who could play piano. So I was like, well, I will. I said, oh, this is going to be cool, and they're, I was all of 18. And I could barely play the piano, let alone play what they were playing. But he says, yeah, we're going to play a blues in F. I was like, oh, I could play a blues in F. All right, let's go. So they count this thing off, and it's like no blues in F you've ever heard. They just take it way out at this crazy tempo. So I'm just kind of holding on by the skin of my teeth, doing my thing. And Ron Carter, I can see him out of the corner of my eye. He's going, what? And he starts dragging his big acoustic bass across the floor over to the piano. And he puts his ear down on the piano, and he looks at me and goes, get the hell out of here. And I was like, closed the lid, got up, and walked out the door. And the drummer came running after me. He goes, where are you going? I was like, I got some work to do. And it was like maybe the greatest thing anybody's ever done to me, because it made me realize that if I was going to be in that world, I had to work. And it did. I from that day on, I made a pact with myself, and I worked as hard as I could every day, and till now. So it was a great lesson to learn. Years later, I went to go see him, and after the show, I went up to him and I introduced myself and explained what happened, and he denied that he ever did that to me. I was trying to tell him what a great thing he did for me. He wasn't having it.
Wiped from his memory.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's an incredible story. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was, to say the least. I'm embarrassed. There were all these people like up in the bleachers of this performance room, and there were these young ladies that I was thinking I was going to be impressing, and that didn't work.
Wow, you got yelled at by Ron Carter. That's an honor.
Ron Carter, yeah. and he didn't say hell either.
Wow. That'll whip you into shape. That's part of the discipline of the jazz discipline, and obviously Fish and the Dead were hugely influenced by that world. But I studied with a jazz drummer, Professor Milford Graves, and he was similar. He said, you don't touch the kunga drum until you've put the work in and worked on your technique. Like, you have to come with reverence and respect for the music. And a little tough love can go a long way. They say play with people who are better than you. And that's an amazing experience you had as a young musician to really motivate you to get your act together. That's really powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What I really love about that story is that in conversations about music and especially improvisation, you often hear about the importance of like risk and failure, but it's not common to actually hear stories about things not going well.
Well, with improvisation, I tell you, when I was playing with Phil Lesh for a bunch of years, Phil was very daring, and he wanted us to just be ourselves and to just go with free abandon. And when you're in a situation like that with a bunch of other musicians, it doesn't always work, and there are great failures that can happen. And but every now and again, you reach nirvana, that place where that group mind happens, and it's magic, and the magic happens, and it's happening because you're getting this energy back from the audience that's lifting you higher and higher. So yeah, it's the risk factor is very important. You always have to take chances, but it's not always going to work out.
It's great advice for music, but also life, right?
Yeah,
might not always work out.
Yeah.
Could you describe how you developed your playing style, or how you would characterize it even?
And who are you talking to?
Both of you.
Oh, Jonny.
I want to hear from Rob, because I'm guessing you were a classical organist, and you play piano in Dark's orchestra. You're a man of technique. I'm more of like a guitarist who has a mini synthesizer in my setup, and keys and percussion have always been part of my repertoire. But I'm sort of a DIY, sort of self-taught as far as keyboardist. I'd like to hear from Rob, because I think he's more of a traditional and schooled keyboardist.
As a teenager, I studied only for a little while before I went to college. I learned the basics. I wanted to stay with guitar. My dad, my mom fought about, they wanted a keyboard in the house. My mother wanted a piano. My father wanted an organ. My father won, and the organ came in the house. So I took some lessons. I learned how to play. And right about that time, I heard this song by Stephen Stills, Love the One You're With. And that Hammond organ solo in that song just tore me to shreds the first time I heard it. And I was like, I need to do that. I need to do that. I have to find out what that is. And I did. I asked people and finally found out a Hammond B3 organ. So that's what I was shooting for, And so I just started listening to as many of the rock organists that I could find, And I think the most influential for me was Greg Allman, because of the way he was able to integrate it into a band situation. Not the greatest soloist, but very tasty, and his sound was impeccable. I mean, it was just so beautiful, and everywhere he placed the organ was perfect, and that's what I was aspiring to. So, there weren't a whole lot of options for me going to school to, what am I going to study? Well, classical organ. Okay, so I played some classical pieces. I figured I could do this, and after just a few weeks, I realized what a monstrous task it was, because not only are you playing with two hands, playing with your feet, and you're playing on multiple levels of organ. There's not just two, there's 3 and 4, and the pedals and all the stops and everything that you have to pull out. And it really was a little too daunting for me. So I'm looking at the piano going, this guy could be a lot easier, man.
And your sight reading, I'm assuming, as well, right?
Yeah. I learned when I started taking guitar, I took lessons for 7 years, and I could read treble clef really well. Then, of course, got the organ, and now I have to read bass clef. And it was a struggle for a long time, but eventually I got good at it, and especially when I went to college, because I had this one professor who used to make me play Bach chorales. He'd say, open the book and play. And then turn to another page, play. And he said, just do this for about 20 minutes to a half an hour every day. And I did it religiously for years, and I became a pretty good reader, you know. But piano was a bear of an instrument, because now, you know, you don't have the luxury of having electricity rule the sound. It's like you have to make the sound. So it took me quite a few years to get the strength to make the piano sing, you know. But I worked at it every day, religiously, many hours, and that's how I learned my technique. As far as the stuff I was listening to when I was in college, I was a Deadhead as a teenager, and loved Keith Godchau's playing. I thought he really was so influential in changing the sound of that band. And but by the time I was a junior in college, I started losing interest in the music, because I started listening to all these jazz pianists, McCoy Tyner and Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, Bud Powell, going back to some of the older guys. And I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to go to those places, you know. Yeah, the Dead were going to these great places, but these guys were taking it way further out. And I never looked back from there. And the only reason I ended up in Dead bands and ended up playing with Phil Lesh and the Dead itself, was because I knew the music so well. And my philosophy was always, well, if I'm going to play this music, I'm going to play it like I play it. I'm not going to play it like Dead keyboard players play it. And even to this day in Dark Star, I mean, every now and again, somebody in the band will go, hey, you think you can maybe play that a little more like Keith, or a little more like Brent Midland? I'm like, okay, all right. And, you know, I can do that a little bit, you know, but I always feel like I need to interject me into the music, you know. Otherwise, it's, you know, it becomes boring, you know.
I bet Phil welcomed you bringing your own character to it as well.
Oh, Phil was great that way. He, from day one, he said, "You are the first among equals here. You just be you." Oh man, what a license to have, man.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so my musical style evolved from listening to all these jazz players and my knowledge of Grateful Dead and jam band music that was, you know, popular at that time. Allman Brothers, Grateful Dead. And I was, when by the time Fish came along, I was just so heavily involved in this band, the Zen Tricksters, and then with Phil and stuff. I really didn't listen that much, you know. Eventually, when I did, though, I was pretty blown away by their improvisational thing, you know. Those guys really made a sound for four guys. Jeez, big sound, right? Yeah.
Did I see you in 2002 at the Berkshire Mountain Music Festival, Berkfest?
With Phil?
Zen Tricksters. I could have sworn.
Oh, no, I was out of the band by then. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I left the band in early 2000. I couldn't keep up playing with them and then playing with Phil. Phil wanted me full time at that point, so away I went. So
that's really cool. You mentioned Stephen Stills, that great organ solo. I love that song. I've always heard sort of almost a gospel, soulful quality to him, and I was wondering if you would speak on both, maybe if he has a background in the church, and more specifically the Hammond organ and its role in, you know, spiritual music, and then bridging to the jam band scene. How did that happen?
Well, I'm not positive, but I think the organist on that Stephen Stills is Mike Finnegan. Are you familiar with him?
I know the name. So
Mike Finnegan, I think he's an LA guy, and he played with Crosby, Stills and Nash for years and years, and he's the one who really taught Greg Allman a lot about the Hammond, you know. gospel music, I mean, it confounds me on some level. It's so spiritual. I'm not a spiritual person in that way. I feel the music, but those guys are, I mean, they are really steeped in the God thing, and I think it's very important to what they do. You know, the sound definitely resonates with me, and it seemed a natural fit in rock and roll music, that's for sure. Because where's rock and roll music comes from? It's where it comes from, you know, from spiritual music. You know, I don't know if did you ever see the movie Ray?
I never did see that one.
So
I haven't seen it either.
There's a scene in there where his girlfriend, who eventually becomes his wife, he plays this song for her, and she goes, "You're just taking the Lord's music, and you can't do that, what you're doing." He goes, "Yeah, but I'm writing about you. How could that be wrong?" You know, but she said it right there. She goes, "He's taking this gospel stuff and making it rock and roll, basically, you know, rhythm and blues." Yeah.
Was that Jamie Foxx? Because he's an incredible singer, incredible pianist.
Oh, if you've never seen the movie, you should see it. It's pretty amazing.
Very cool. And we would be remiss if we didn't mention, while mentioning the Hammond organ, the Leslie rotating speaker, which, of course, Trey has reappropriated and put his guitar through.
Love it.
It's a classic sound. Pink Floyd used it, and
even the Beatles used it. Great. Jerry Garcia did it.
Did he?
Yeah. That's the thing about the Hammond organ, is that the fact that you can change the speed, and that's where my, you know, this, I get goosebumps when that Leslie's spinning fast. Wow. What a sound.
Yeah.
Stephanie, do you understand what that is? The Hammond, the spinning speaker? Yeah. Okay.
May I take us back to music education briefly? Awesome. So I'm curious if either of you remember anything about your first public performance.
Do you, Rob?
Like, how far back in your brain is that memory?
So I think I was 7 or 8, and we were at a family wedding, and my father made me get up to play with the band, the wedding band.
Wow.
So they stood me up on top of a piano, and there I was with this guy's big clunky, he had one of those big fat Gibson L5s or something like that. You know the guitar I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Big jazz guitar. And I'm like this little kid, you know, and I'm up there and I played some Beatles songs.
Wow.
And the crowd just ate it up. And, you know, that's when I realized, like, oh, this could be cool. This could be cool.
Good on your dad for getting you up there. That's how you learn, is you throw yourself into the fray, and you gotta make it work. And those formative experiences for kids are so important. If a kid receives praise and adoration from family or friends, and like, yeah, you're doing great, that sounds good, some applause, that can be huge for a 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old in motivating them, not just in music, but their self-confidence and their expressive. Yeah. It's a great feeling, and we should always encourage young people and praise, and not scold and discipline too much. You know, when they're making mistakes, that's how they learn, and just keep coaxing them along, and they'll blossom.
I agree with you 100%. You know, back in school days when we were in the chorus, and it was such a thrill to play, the Christmas concert, and that audience just eats it up, and they're applauding, and you can just see that on everybody's face, And were you ever in a school band, Johnny, at all?
The jazz choir and the singing groups, and I love those concerts. I mean, it's the once a year when your family and friends are all in one place for this kind of event, which I feel is very human. a very human need to get together and share music. It's a great experience, a very important part of being a human, I think. So I remember those fondly. Yeah.
Awesome.
You kind of made references to the importance of getting young musicians out in front of a crowd. So that, kind of brings me back to thinking about the importance of music education, right? We kind of live in a society in which music education is constantly under threat, but especially, in the past year and a half during COVID, when budgets have really been tight. So one of the questions I've been asking all of our participants in these masterclass sessions is, like, can you give me your best argument for music education so that our audience members can maybe take that out into their community when they're trying to advocate for, instruction with instruments and things along those lines?
Well, it goes beyond music. It's working with others. It's playing as a team. It's listening. It's working, learning to work with other people is just an important life skill for so many facets of what we do. It's self-confidence, self-assurance, being able to speak articulately and confidently. It's sad that it's the first thing that's cut in the budgets, because I really do see the benefits of it. I've had some students that I've been teaching since they were 5. Now they're 16, and in part because of weekly music lessons, they're just brilliantly mature and well-spoken. Some of them aren't doing music full time. They're doing chemistry or writing, but they have this way about them that seems, that they've sort of self-assured and confident. And I think music can trickle out into so many other areas of life. And I wish it wasn't the first thing that's cut on budgets. I think we need to rethink that as a society.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I was a teacher. I taught for 10 years in a music school, and most of my students were at this particular point in their lives. They were. I don't know if it was the parents just wanted them to, they needed another hour to fill between their math classes that they were taking and karate and play dates. But what I found with these kids is they enjoyed it so much, to sit there and to play a song. You could see it on their faces, and that they're going home, they're playing it for their family, playing it for their friends. It gives them a lot of self-confidence. And music is a universal language. It's in every culture. It's so important. And so I agree with you, Jonny. Yeah, absolutely.
Well said, Rob.
What do you think, in terms of advocacy, the most effective action members of our audience can take to support education would be?
Wow.
It's a good question.
It is.
It's a complicated issue, so I don't mean to oversimplify it. But I mean, is it fundraising? Is it raising awareness?
Making your voice heard, I guess, going to board meetings, just being vocal in the community that hey, we can't cut this budget. Music class is not just an auxiliary thing. Music and the arts, just being an advocate for that in your day-to-day, when you talk to folks, when you post on social media, supporting local music schools or music lesson facilities. If you are a musician, teaching lessons, sharing that joy and that knowledge with other people to help it spread. But that's a great question. How else can we really influence school curriculums and school budgets?
It starts on a grassroots level, but it has to go beyond. It has to go further than that, and it really, I think it starts to get political, because you need the politicians to advocate for school budgets, for education. It doesn't seem that enough politicians are talking about education. It's like seems the last thing they ever talk about. It's nice that Joe Biden, it's strange, but I think I've heard him talk about how we need to pour more money into education. It's so nice to hear, you know. So hopefully, if they can do that, you know, with and get these budgets up, we can get music back in a lot of schools, because so many schools have cut their programs. This is what parents of younger friends of mine have been telling me. You know, their young kids, there's no music lessons, even before COVID, you know, and that's so sad to me. I mean, I played the tuba in the school band, and that's some of the coolest experiences ever. You know, playing in the junior high school big band, that's great, and none of these kids are getting that experience. You know, I don't know. It almost seems to me, again, I'm a little clocked out of the local scenes as far as, you know, young bands and stuff, but it doesn't seem to me that there are as many young bands around as there used to be. Now I could be delusional. I mean, I'm locked in my world, but maybe Jonny, maybe you know, it just doesn't seem like there's as many kids starting bands anymore. At least that's the way I see it.
Yeah, you could be right. There's definitely a lot more screen time than when I was, you know, which there's benefits to things like YouTube and stuff. Kids can teach themselves. And I've seen kids teach themselves songs just with little YouTube keyboard instructional videos. They're not reading music, but they're learning how to play something, which is pretty cool. So there's greater access for information, but it's a double-edged sword, because with too much access, too much distractions, too much time on your device, it can cut into, like Rob said, into time getting together with your friends and forming a band, which is a great learning experience. So we could just have to keep advocating for it, showing examples of kids who did play at a young age and how that has benefited them throughout life. Doing this panel, you know, we're helping raise awareness in some small way.
Many years ago, when I was playing with the Dead, I was in Buffalo, New York. I was walking through the lobby of the hotel, and I heard behind me Rob Barraco. And I turned around expecting, you know, a fan. And this guy comes up to me. He introduces himself to me, and he goes, "You probably will never remember me." He goes, "But you were my teacher, and I want to tell you, those were the greatest couple of years of my life, and it influenced me to actually get in a career with music." He became a jingle writer. Wow. And quite a successful one, actually. And he says, "I owe it all to you." Oh, that was like the greatest feeling in the world, you know? So yeah, it goes to show you, you know.
That's beautiful. Yeah, just a little coaxing can go such a long way. The only people who find success in music are the ones who try and stick with it. And if you really practice and I mean, this is sort of your next question, our advice for young musicians. It's if you really devote yourself to it and don't give in to the fear of, oh, music isn't a possible career. Well, the people who say that and give up, yeah, they're not going to become musicians. But if you put your head down, find a teacher, find a practice schedule, you can do this, be it teaching, writing jingles, performing in a band. It's definitely an option for a career path. So believe in yourself, work hard.
Absolutely. Also an argument for the importance of music education in terms of the way that it teaches discipline.
Discipline is key. You have to, you know, those times when you say to yourself, I really don't want to play today. Those are the times you have to force yourself down, and you have to say, I'm gonna give this, even if I only give it a half an hour. And that's what I was always telling my students, like, just a half an hour a day, if that's all you can afford, but do it. And I'll tell you, the ones that did it, you could see it after just a little bit of time. They're playing their hearts out. It's beautiful. But yeah, discipline is where it's all at.
Yeah, it's almost like an athletic level of discipline in like the jazz school, you know, daily practice, knowing all your scales, doing exercises, transcribing, learning songs by ear. it's that kind of practice can just teach you, like you said, Stephanie, just in other areas of life, discipline and how to really focus and progress at something efficiently. So yeah, I can't speak highly enough for the benefits that music has for the learning mind.
Yep,
I think we all agree with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
If we think about music education as something that's lifelong, I'm curious about how, as professional musicians, you continue to challenge yourself and kind of push the boundaries of your playing. For example, is there's something that you want to be able to do that you haven't quite figured out yet, or something that you're still working on?
I've always wanted to be a really good classical pianist. Now I realized that because of the world I chose to go to, that's not a possibility for me. I can't make that kind of devotion, but as part of my daily routine of playing, I play Bach and Chopin and a bunch of other things. I like Debussy and Brahms.
I was gonna say, do you do any Debussy?
Yeah, I actually worked the Clair de Lune. I worked the first one and Clair de Lune, and I want to learn the rest of it. I saw a performance, this guy, a couple of years ago. It just floored me, and I was like, I have to learn this. So I learned the first one, and it was so beautiful. And you know, that's my challenge. So I made it a part of my practice routine every day. You know, so I'll spend an hour and a half working on that stuff after I do the other stuff I need to work on. You know,
has that found its way into your playing with Dark Star?
There's no doubt. I find myself, I found myself with some of those melodies are working their way through these jams, you know. And what's funny is our lead guitar player, Jeff Manson, he picks up on it sometimes. And he'll just look at me and laugh, you know. And he does the same thing to me. Like he'll pick a theme out of something, and all of a sudden I'm like, I know that. And he just like gives me the look, you know. So yeah, it's really cool when that stuff happens. Everything you play eventually finds its way into the music. You know, it takes time. Once it's integrated into your playing and part of your muscle memory and your brain, you know, it'll find its way in.
That's why I've been shying away a little bit from like too much metronome practice, or I was doing broken thirds a lot. Parts that I was writing just sort of sounded like these exercises. So now more I'm trying to learn vocal parts, you know, learn a singer's part on the keys or on guitar, learn, you know, just transcribing, learning a song by ear and figuring it out. I feel like that's more musical to me. So it's not just doing exercises and getting that muscle memory going, but actually learning how to play certain things, and then those find their way into your music.
There you go. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I have a warm-up routine that I do every day. It's kind of like exercises, but I only do it for about 15 minutes. And it's just so that I don't end up hurting myself. It's like any athlete has to stretch before they go out there, or you stretch before you run. It's the same thing. You want to get your arms, your fingers, your hands, your shoulders warmed up and ready to go, and then you can delve into it. And the best thing is I love transcribing solos, and learning solos it's such a cool thing, you know. And it's quite mind-blowing when you realize what some of these guys can pull off. And then you sit there and you're analyzing it, and then it finally hits you. Oh, I see where he got this from, and how did this, and it all fits together. Yeah. That's a great approach, man. It's not doing exercises so much, you know.
You play what you want to be able to sound like. And
right.
Like when you learn someone else's solo, you're sort of in their head for a second. And I find that every time I learn somebody else's solo, it teaches me a new little technique or lick that I wouldn't have thought to do.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm right with you, man. Definitely.
That's really great advice, right, for other musicians continuing with their playing, whether they're professional or, you know, sort of casual players. But some of the references to soloing has me thinking about kind of improvisation, which was one of our topics for today. And so because I'm a philosopher, I tend to think conceptually. So I'm really wondering if you could just tell, how would you characterize improvisation? You know, how does it differ from soloing or what people might call noodling?
Soloing is part of improvisation.
Mm-hmm.
I studied with this guy named Sal Mosca a whole bunch of years ago, a jazz pianist, and the very first thing he ever said to me, he let me play, and he goes, "Do you know what musical truth is?" And I was like, "No, what's musical truth?" He says, "You have to play what you hear, not what you think you should play." And I just sat there like, well, I don't understand what that means. He goes, "Oh, you will." He made sure I learned. But it's improvisation is hearing and then instantaneously putting it into your instrument. It's not an easy concept. It's something that takes many, many years to develop. Soloing is one thing, and then there's, playing in a jam band, a true jam band, is when everybody it's like having a musical conversation. So let's say there's 5 people in the band. Well, there's 5 conversations going on, and you're listening and contributing at the same time. It's a very it's a crazy concept, and that's what it leads back to that whole thing where you take chances in the improvisation, hoping at the end result is going to be making magic, so group improvisation is different than just soloing. I don't know if can you expound on that, Jonny? Because I find I can't put it into words so much.
No, that's great. I heard a jazz musician once refer to, I wish I could remember who it was. He said, "I'm not an improviser. I'm a composer in the moment."
I love it.
It's like you're not just noodling or doing exercises like you said, but you're hearing something and channeling it through your instrument, which is the ultimate truth. Like, to be able to hear something and bring it to life is a lifelong process for me to work on it.
That it is a lifelong pursuit, and that's what we keep working at to get better at it, and that's what I work at every day. After I work on ideas and then I'll do my classical thing, then I will just sit and play, and I will play whatever comes into my head, and it's where I've written most of the music I've ever written comes from that.
Wow.
But I love the idea of I'm a composer in the moment, because that's what it is. You're coming up with these motifs, and then one of your bandmates will hear that motif and expound on it, and it's like that's where it comes from. Yeah, love that. Yeah,
these are fantastic responses. I'm totally going to take them back to my philosophy of music students as a kind of a concrete definition of the text that they're reading. I really like the idea of improvisation as a musical conversation, right? That where you're listening and contributing at the same time. If we think about it that way, what would make that conversation, right, like successful or not? Like what makes a good or a bad improvisation?
You got to know what the other person's doing and sort of responding. You got to try to remove the ego. Not about showing off how fast you can play or your new lick, but what serves the song, what serves the vibe. How can I communicate with these other musicians up here?
Yeah, Derek Trucks. Are you familiar with him?
Are you
Derek.
the commandments of jam?
Yeah. So one of those commandments, I'm paraphrasing, but he says your job is to try to make everybody else sound better.
Wow.
And in order to do that, you have to be listening, and you have to be able to leave room. Ego has no place in music, as far as I'm concerned. Ego destroys that. Yeah, you have to be selfless. You have to devote yourself to that moment and with that group of musicians you're playing with, and to serve them and the higher ideal, the music itself.
As soon as you think it's about you is when you mess up.
Bye.
Yeah.
Since we're focusing on keyboards in this session, like, how would you describe the role of the keyboard in an improvisation, right? When you're in a jam, what's the goal?
Which keyboard?
I'm intentionally being kind of vague because I know you, right? Yeah. You all play very different instruments, and so I'm gonna let you pick what you would like to discuss and run with it.
That's actually a difficult question. It's you're, like I said before, I consider myself mostly a pianist. I dabble on the organ and other keyboards, but piano is my main voice. So the piano is just my voice, as it could be a saxophone or a guitar or a drum. So I just utilize what it takes to make that sound. One thing a piano player and even an organist does really well is to what they call comp behind another musician. So he's laying down a bed for the other musician to solo, improvise over. Like in a traditional jazz band, so the piano player will just be comping chords behind the singer or the horn player, and so that there is a harmonic context for them to work in. But you also have to be listening, because as they're playing, they're twisting that harmonic sense, and if you're in tune with what they're doing, it changes how you approach your chordal thing without getting in their way, it's so difficult, man. Being in a jazz group is very difficult as far as I'm concerned, at least in the traditional sense. More of the more modern jazz groups, that what I call group improvisers, it's a little different, because it's more like the Grateful Dead concept. It's like everybody's really soloing at the same time. I wouldn't maybe not call it soloing, but being part of the conversation. When in a jazz group or even a rock group, if you're just comping behind them, you're just kind of setting the stage for them. And the better you set the stage, the better they sound. Yeah. That makes sense?
oh, totally does. I was waiting to see if Johnny wanted to jump in.
You pretty much covered it, yeah. Obviously it changes if you're on a Moog synthesizer, which can only play one note at once. You're probably going to be doing more of a vocal or leady saxophone type thing.
Right.
Piano and someone else is soloing, like Rob said, you can comp, which can be tricky. I remember in college playing in a jazz quartet and at Music Workshop, which was sort of this weekly meeting where we would play for faculty and they would give us feedback. And one of my professors was like, yeah, your comping is almost like soloing. like really lay back and just give the harmonic context.
Yeah, like leaving holes so so other musicians have a place to play. And that's been a lifelong struggle for me. I've been called, an overplayer for a long time. It's like a quick anecdote that goes to that is when I first joined Dark Star Orchestra, their whole thing is recreating Grateful Dead shows. And it came to this place where I had this 2-bar little motif that I had to play. It was kind of like a montuno, and it was supposed to go da 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 da, and it set the scene for the next part of the music. So we get to that place, and all of a sudden, I start going zanky, and the drummers just looked at me like, "Really?" Oh, it kicked my butt, man. They were so mad at me. And I knew instantly. I was like, why did I do that? It's so awful, you know? I could have just did the right thing, which is the simple thing, but I couldn't do it. Yeah.
Thinking about improvisation, right, as a musical conversation, right, that means that there's multiple parts to that, right? And so I'm wondering if you both would be willing to just kind of describe how COVID and the stay-at-home measures have impacted your creative process when, you know, some of those conversations weren't able to take place physically or in real time and so forth.
Wow.
Probably practiced a lot more, huh, Rob?
Mm-hmm.
Hell yeah. You know, on a certain level, when they canceled the shows after February, I had a conversation with one of our drummers, and I said, what do you think? He says, I don't think we're going to be back to playing for about a year and a half. And I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. So I really took advantage of that time, and I worked really hard every day, because when you're on the road as much as we are, it becomes more difficult. Like I still practice every day on the road. I show up early, I put my headphones on, and I work. But it's a different kind of focus when you're home alone and you're not being distracted, you know, and no sound check is coming. You have 4 or 5 uninterrupted hours to do stuff, and I got a lot done. I made up for a lot of lost time in this past year. But I tell you, I missed it sorely after a little while. It's like there's nothing quite as satisfying to me than the group mind. I've never considered myself a solo artist. I've always wanted to be in a group. You know, I wanted to be surrounded by my peers, and so I started to miss it. And it's real nice to be back to it, even though, you know, I bitch and moan every time I have to walk out the house. It's like once I'm there doing it, it's like, oh, that's right. Here we are. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, we got the chance to write more music than we usually do because we weren't on the road. You know, that's a hard thing to compose on the road. A lot of bands do it during sound check and stuff, but we're like city, and sometimes you don't have time to breathe. So it was really nice. We wrapped up an album and we started writing some new stuff, and we're ready to hit it again after, you know, this break. You know, it's good to take a break sometimes from the road. So, but now we're recharged and ready for a summer of music. We're very excited.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love that, recharged. You know, I think that I can speak not just for myself, but for everybody who's watching this, right? That we are so looking forward to hearing the new material that you have come up with and getting out there and dancing and boogieing with you all. So thank you for everything that you do. It has truly been an honor and just a blissful experience to get to hear your experiences and philosophies as musicians. So thank you again for joining the Mockingbird Foundation and celebrating our 25th anniversary.